Welcome everybody to Beginning Ham Radio meeting. We are sponsored by the Portland Amateur Radio Club. My name is Max, K2MAX, and welcome to the January 28th, 2021 Beginning Ham Radio meeting. So for our agenda tonight, we're gonna just do, I think, a couple of quick announcements, and we'll do some first-time meeting participant introductions. So if this is your first time, you have the option, if you'd like, to just introduce yourself. Nothing too painful. Then we'll go into our weekly topic. And this week, our weekly topic is radio etiquette. I thought it would be, you know, as you guys are getting your license, or if you already have your license, it'd probably be nice to know, like, you know, kind of some do's and don'ts of getting on the air. And then that'll last for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have just a general questions and answers. And you can ask it on the meeting topic tonight, or just anything in general, ham radio related. What radio should I buy? How do I get on HF? Things like that. All right, for announcements and news, want to plug the Portland Amateur Radio Club. We do have monthly meetings, and our next monthly meeting is going to be
yesterday.
The next Portland Amateur Radio Club meeting is going to be the second Monday of February at 7 o'clock. And you can find out more information on how to register. If you guys are attending this meeting, most likely you'll get an email with information on how to register for that meeting. Same painless process that we do for that. And then we are now putting our beginning radio meeting video archives. So this one and all the previous ones from the end of last year is on the website, www.w7lt.org. For right now, we will most likely have a new website coming up in the next couple of weeks. But for right now, you'll have to put in the www. For some reason, we don't have the redirect for that. And then future beginning radio meeting topics are also listed on the website for the next few weeks. So if there's a particular topic that you want to see, let me know, and we can put it in one of the upcoming weeks. And just so you know, kind of in general, like what's coming up, if you want to skip a week here or there. So for the next Portland Amateur Radio Club meeting, this is the meeting topic. It's going to be a spirally loaded copper tape and PVC dipole. It's pretty inexpensive, 2-meter. Basically, it's a vertical dipole, helically wound around some PVC pipe. It's pretty inexpensive to build, and we'll try to see if we can get some kind of parts kits together so that you don't have to buy, you know, a 60-foot roll of tape when you only need 54 inches of it. We'll see if there's a way that we can get some of the parts to you. The pipe itself, I think it's 1 1/4 inches. And it's only, I think it's less than 20 inches tall. So this is a really great project if you're just getting into radio, you don't want to spend $150 or so on putting an antenna outside. You can actually waterproof this fairly inexpensively and put it outside. But even if you just had it inside near a window or something like that, especially if you're in an apartment or if you just want to mount it somewhere on your balcony, this is a great way to get your radio signal out just a little bit better than a handheld with a rubber duck antenna on top. So that's coming up on February 8th at 7 o'clock. All right, so if this is your first time to this meeting, if you'd like to, if you'd introduce yourself with your name and your call sign, if you have one, and how you heard about this meeting and kind of what brought you to ham radio, or what you're interested in. Anybody want to go first? This is their first time to this meeting.
Hi, this is Sam. Call sign Kilo 06, Hotel X-Ray Golf. Last week was my first week, but I didn't introduce myself at that point. But Bruce Schaefer sent out notice about this meeting, or that's who I believe I received it from. And I originally got interested in ham radio when I was young in Boy Scouts, and then I didn't do anything with it. But then more recently, since 2013, I finished my technician and general license, and was interested in satellite radio at the time. And I've just come back around to an interest in satellite again.
Oh, very nice. Well, welcome and thank you very much. Yeah, satellite is something I haven't done, but we've had a couple of people who came to our last field day, which is an annual event, it's a national annual event put on by the ARRL. And we've had a couple of people that have tried to make a satellite contact during field day. You actually get, I think, 100 points for just one satellite contact, which is great.
Yeah.
It's actually really easy to get into now. You can build your own antenna and you can just use a simple handheld radio. Once you start doing it, you probably want to invest in a little bit more equipment, but it's great that it's so easy to get into. Well, welcome, Sam, and thank you.
Thank you. I purchased a Arrow antenna last August when I started getting back into it, and then work got crazy, and now I'm finally, thankfully, able to get back to it.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the antennas that if you're going to buy one, that's probably the one to buy. So that's awesome.
Thanks.
Anybody else? Is this your first time?
Yeah, hi, Barry Newman. And let's see if I can get this right, because it's Kilo Juliet 7 Tango Papa X-ray.
Yeah.
There
awesome.
Yeah, I have one quick question, because I see that you have what appears to be a vanity call sign, K2 Max, easy to remember. So I actually applied for it. I was just wondering whether this was like really poor etiquette to, like, before you even make your first call, to go and get a vanity call sign. For me, it was just something that's easier to remember than some random letters thrown together by the FCC or whoever does that stuff. So that was kind of a question. I don't know. Is that for a newbie to go about getting I mean, to me, it's an easy to remember call sign rather than a vanity call sign, but is that okay to do?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, it's probably a good idea for you to do it now, just simply because you want to, like, in ham radio, your call sign is essentially like your second name. Yeah. Right. And so you don't want to make a whole bunch of activity with one call sign and then switch to another. There are people I know that do switch their call sign often with the vanity system. But yeah, it's now is a great time to do that. And you want to do it now, because otherwise, I think coming up sometime this year, probably June, July, you'll actually have to pay an extra $35 to do something like that. Whereas right now it's free.
Yeah, no, I already did that.
Oh, you did? Awesome.
Yeah, no, I figured out the system. Somewhere it was commented in one of the emails I got, if you want to do that, it's not so easy to do it. It's a little bit of a bizarre process, but even trying to find, like do the search function, but it's not too hard to navigate. So in any event, I have a whole bunch of K numbers followed by BMN, which is my initials. I figured that was a lot easier for me to remember. I'm getting too old to remember things other than my name. So in any case, so that's my call sign. And I got an email from somewhere after having passed my test and getting my license. So that's how I heard about it. And actually, after I registered for this one, realized that this is kind of an ongoing thing. So I am glad to see that you guys are posting. You're going to post some of the videos of prior things. I got into ham radio. I had intended to do this literally years ago, for disaster preparedness. I'm a team leader for the net team as opposed to the ham net stuff in Northwest, in Northwest Heights in Portland. And I don't know if you are familiar with Paul Lefevre.
No.
Yeah, so he's very active in the net program in Aries and
Yes, Paul is a member of Multnomah County Aries group.
Right. So in any case, Paul was my assistant team leader and a friend of mine, and the problem is that I would have made him come here to my house and sit with me while I figured out how to turn this stupid thing on and actually make it work, because you can do all the tests that you want, but sitting down and trying to figure out how to do this. And not only that, I'm a Mac person, and all of the software that I have come across now is basically, it's Windows-based software for how do you program things, and it's pretty dense in terms of trying to figure that out. So so this is kind of what brought me to this meeting, is the hope that in the absence of torturing someone into sitting with me to figure out how to make it all work, hopefully I will glean enough information from some of these talks that I'll actually be able to be a functional user of the ham radio before I go on to my next level of licensing. So,
well, that's great.
I'm glad you guys are here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Our whole point really is to try to get people on the air. We do have a lot of people who have joined before who have had their license for many years. There's nothing wrong with that, but maybe just need a little bit more help to get on the air and get up and running. Barry, we do have a session coming up in the next couple of weeks on radio programming, and where we'll kind of go over using a computer to program your radio. This can be very helpful if you have like a Baofeng or another kind of Chinese import radio, because those types of radios are, which one is that? Oh, Baofeng, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with the radio itself. It's a great radio, but it's just a pain to program without a computer. And it's really easy to program with a computer. So even if you have our recommended Yaesu FT60R, it's very easy to program with a computer. Well, great. Thanks, Barry, for joining. Anybody else your first time?
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I have one other quick question. The website that you have, is that your I forget, now I'm blocking on the word, when you have a net group, or a net or something like, the W7LT, is that your call sign? Is that the call sign for your club?
It is. Yeah, and for those of you who aren't familiar, when you take your test, you get a operator call sign. That's your personal call sign. But if you get, I believe it's 4 or more people together, you can actually form a club, and then you can apply for a club license. And we do use the club call for things like field day and other events where we participate as a club. So instead of one of us using our personal call sign, we'll use the club call sign, and then our results for that contest or for that event are listed under the club call. And then Barry, you'd also brought up vanity call signs. And for those of you who don't know, when you take your technician license and you pass your test, you will be issued a sequential call sign, which means whatever call sign they happen to have that comes next out of their group of the series, that's what you'll get. And oftentimes it will, not be necessarily a pretty call sign. It could be just basically, it's a 2x3, which means that you'll have 2 letters, just like Barry has KJ, and then 7, you'll have a number after that, and the number is dependent upon your region. So Oregon, Washington, I believe Idaho is 7, and then you'll have 3 more letters. So that's why they call it a 2x3. As a technician, you can apply for a vanity call sign, which means that you would go on to either the FCC or another website that is dedicated to helping you get a vanity call sign. And you can find call signs that are available. And most of the time they have been issued to other people that have either passed or are let their license lapse for more than 2 years. And you can actually apply for that call sign. And for a technician 2x3, there are lots of them out there. If you wanted like a 1x2 or 2x1, and those are available only to amateur extra, there's a little bit more competition just because there's a lot fewer of those call signs. That'd be actually a good topic to bring up. And if you're thinking of, go ahead.
Well, because I thought you could apply for, because there's a 2x3 and you can also apply for a 1x3, I thought.
Yes. Yeah. As a technician, you can apply for a 1x3 also. But if you wanted,
you have a 1x3 actually, but
I do. Yeah. So even though I have my extra call sign, I just, even my first name is 3 letters. So I thought that that'd be a good call sign, but for anybody that has a longer name, you could actually just, a lot of people do their initials or some other 2 or 3 letter combination that they think is neat. The other thing to think about is if you ever wanted to go into using Morse code, CW, there are some letters that are easier than others. So that like a U, V, Q, Y, those are pretty long in Morse code. So you may want to go for something more simple like A or N or T, E. But we can cover that kind of in the future about getting your vanity call sign. And if you wanted to do it, now would be the time, because like I mentioned earlier, the FCC is going to institute a $35 per kind of event, and an event would include getting your vanity call sign. All right, anybody, let me go the right direction here. Anybody else, is this your first time you want to introduce yourself? Harriet?
Yes, Kilo Juliet 7 Romeo Zulu Victor. I'm in Northwest Portland, and I got here by way of Bruce Schaefer. I did the class with him a couple of months ago, and I actually got into this because I am a net, and I heard that strong call that they really need more AROs for the network. So that actually is my primary motivation, although I have to say there's a lot of stuff that's fun to do. But my first goal is to get proficient at being a net. I mean, being an ARO, which I'm far from right now.
Well, welcome, and that's exactly why we're here. I'm glad you attended tonight.
Sorry, I can't get my screen over here. It's not working on this format, so you have to look at this as well.
Well, welcome, and I'm really glad that you came to something like this to kind of help you be more proficient at being an amateur radio operator. So I think, a lot of people, they study for the test and they're like, yay, I passed. But actually that's like the first step. I've
told people that all that means is I can pass a test. Although at this point I'm working on the 800 and I'm not being very successful. So it's like, okay.
Yeah. Well, welcome and thank you, Harriet.
Okay.
Anybody else, this is your first time, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, this is Jeff Frost. It's my first time. And
hi, Jeff.
I had a license back in the 80s, N7 BGM, which expired. So I need to take the test again. But I got interested in this because I'm a net also, and it seemed like it would be useful for that. So,
very good.
When I took the test, you had to do Morse code. And so I'm glad to hear I don't have to study that again.
Yes, that's it. It was a big learning hurdle, I guess, for a lot of people. I made it up to 13 and was struggling for many years on 20 words a minute to get my extra. And they actually dropped the extra code. And that's when I got my extra license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can see where that could be useful in a situation where you don't have much power or it's hard to get a signal through. But for now,
yeah,
being able to talk, I'm better at.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great place to start. Jeff, did you just have a technician license back in the 80s?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And one thing I'm curious about is, like I say, for doing network, the Portland Net. For one, in the net we use the other radios, the GMRS and radio. I wondered, is there a ham radio that works on those frequencies too, or do you need separate pieces of equipment?
So there is. We can talk a little bit about that during the question and answer period. So technically for FRS, GMRS, you do need to have a radio that's type 95 certified. Mm-hmm. And they, all that means is that they have a small non-removable antenna. They're limited to 2 watts at most. Uh-huh. I'm not sure quite how Portland Net works. If they're encouraging people to buy like Baofeng radios, but Baofeng radios can transmit on both amateur radio and FRS frequencies. So that's one option. Another option that I really like is Radio Oddity. I can put it in the chat, but essentially they also have a lot of radios that you can program for not only FRS, or I should say GMRS radio or General Mobile Radio Service, but they're the same frequencies, and amateur radio. So I can definitely send you some information about those, and I will, if you want to just send me a private chat with your email. I can email you out the websites. Or I can just put them in chat. Or Marino, could you put those in chat?
Okay. Yeah, if I can use one piece of equipment instead of 2, that seems like it'd be more convenient, unless it's a huge price difference or something.
It's not. Like Baofengs are one of the cheapest radios that you can buy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've heard those mentioned in the net. So, okay.
Yes. So what did you ask to put in the chat room? Link to Radio Oddity or to the Baofengs?
Yeah, so BTEC. Where the Baofengs are, and then Radio Oddity.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Anybody else first time here want to introduce themselves?
Hey, I'm Pat, KG7TTR. I just got my technician license on Sunday, or passed the test on Sunday and got it on Monday. So I'm super ultra fresh. Was trained as an electrical engineer. I have a master's in electrical engineering, but have been working mostly on more like pure math. But so this is kind of fun to get back to something that's more electronics related for a hobby thing. I'm interested in ham radios specifically for emergency communications and being more prepared. So this seemed like getting connected with a community and learning, how to connect with folks, how to repeaters, nets, all of this, so that, to practice so that if it's actually needed, I understand, I can do it. That's basically my, what I'm looking for. And of course to connect with cool community.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've made a lot of very, very good friends. Marino, Dan, they're both on here, and a few other people. And a lot of people just in the Portland Amateur Radio Club have become very good friends. And they know a lot of things that I don't, and vice versa. So we work pretty well as a team to kind of learn. So that's awesome that you have joined us tonight. And I hope you join us going in the future. Yeah,
I mean, I think that in order for something to become practice, like the first thing I did after I got my license was to try to find a club just to get connected with activities because otherwise I think it's easy to just let it sit and not get going.
Yeah, you always have an excuse. There's always more laundry instead of a contest or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that in other times. I said, come for the M radio and stay for the friends. But yes. Nick, who is not around here, told me that was too cheesy.
Hey,
well, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I've got a Zoom related question. If you want to speak, is there a way to like raise your hand or something, or do you just start talking?
Yeah, so there is a way to raise your hand, but if you just start talking, that's fine. These sessions are kind of meant to be informal. Our other meeting that we have on a monthly basis, we'll have a presentation and usually hold the questions till the end.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have a question, just give a shout out.
All right.
Cool. Anybody else? This is your first time.
Hi, I'm Bridget Rigo. This is not my first time. I was in last week, but I didn't introduce myself. I went through NET in 2019, was certified, and decided to get my license in October. So my call sign is Kilo Juliet 7, Juliet Uniform Foxtrot. And I have been listening in with and conversing a bit with the Laurelhurst Simplex Training Net on Mondays, but that's really about all I've been doing.
Okay.
And I just got into this because I figured it might be easier to do communication than it would be going in and, rescuing someone and trying to carry a person out. So that was my incentive.
That's awesome. Yeah, Bridget, actually, you and I are on the same page. When I lived in San Francisco for 6 years, I'm originally from here, but I was the same way. My focus was radio and not cribbing and rescuing and that kind of stuff. So it worked really well because I think CERT and NET, they're both the same program. They kind of take everybody, no matter what your interest is. And I know that they are always, they value ham radio operators. So that's great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've also been talking to Ernie, and he has assigned me to the fire station on 57th and Sandy. So I really feel like I need to know what the heck I'm doing. I did get to go before COVID hit with a gentleman named Lee, and he was very helpful and has been very helpful to me. And I was at a fire station with him and watched him set up, and that was great. So anyway, I'm just here to learn more. So thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Bridget. Yeah. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Scott Huff. Live down South Waterfront. I'm a fairly recent ARO certified person, and my call sign is Kilo Juliet 7 Mike Bravo Sierra. I'm not exactly sure how I heard about this meeting. I was at the last meeting, but I didn't have a chance to introduce myself. And I think you just said something about you weren't really into cribbing and all that stuff for emergency stuff. That's actually what I thought I was going to, was preparing myself for, and then other people kept encouraging me to move ahead with the radio stuff. So I have, and I guess that's what I'm going to focus on down here. I'm on the South Waterfront net.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'll tell you, when we had when I was in San Francisco and I was part of the CERT program, which is the same as NET, a lot of the people who signed up for, the cribbing and the search and rescue and things like that, they had to, get their backpacks on and go out to all the neighborhoods in the rain. Whereas I was sitting in the ham trailer, the radio trailer, all nice and toasty warm, and eating all the snacks that they had out for everybody and passing radio messages back and forth. So I thought that was pretty cool. Every part of CERT and NET is very important. But it's great that you're here and wanting to learn more, because skilled operators are definitely always in need. So thank you, Scott. Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Actually, this is Barry. I just want to pipe in with one other thing. You guys, as much as I like and respect the need for radio operators, I'm a certified CERT instructor, and my area of specialty is search and rescue. Light search and rescue, and I'm a surgeon, so we do medical triage, et cetera. And that's really where it's at. I mean, that's what got me interested in it. So I'm interested to learn the communications piece, but, really, I'm shocked that you guys don't want to be out there like breaking your back, digging through rubble and pulling people out of it. So.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Cool. Anybody else? We didn't do introductions last time, so it's taking a little bit longer this time.
I can do. This is Lee.
Hi, Lee.
Hi. I want to thank Bridget for all the kind words there, because she and I met up at the fire station on Burnside around 78th. And so she's been an enthusiastic learner for becoming a ham operator. And so I got my technician license in 2012, and I did nothing with it until about 2017, when it was clear that our neighborhood emergency team had no amateur radio operators, and I was kind of losing some mobility. So I thought, well, I'm not going to be out doing search and rescue anymore. Maybe it would be better if I got myself reinterested in my ham license. And so I joined Multnomah County Aries, and also studied to get my amateur radio operator's certificate through NET. So that's where I'm at right now. And so we now have 2 ham radio operators, certified ones on our NET, but we need many more. Like you said, Max, there's just never enough people, because you really need 2 if you're going to have 1 working on a shift. You have to have a recorder and somebody to relieve you, and so on and so forth. So I'm trying to encourage anybody I can to become an amateur radio operator. So that's my interest here. I'm going to have to leave about 7 though, by the way, because I do have another meeting to go to. So if I become blank, that's the reason, but thanks.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Lee. Yeah, and we're recording this, so if you ever want to pick up the last half hour, it takes me about 48 hours to put up the video. Yeah, and on that, I think it's wonderful that the net up here is encouraging people to get their ham radio license, because even if you are out doing search and rescue, being able to carry a ham radio out there versus an FRS radio is so much better. You can communicate back to the base so much easier. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Anybody else for first time? Cool. All right, let's get into. Go ahead, Barry.
Very quickly, just as you're getting ready to start that, as a team leader for many years, one of the people who I trained with a long time ago was the team leader for a small net team on the east side. And I met him at one of the team leader meetings, and he said, oh, they were really prepared because they had 4 people on their team, and all 4 of them were radio operators. And they had the whole thing all laid out, that they knew exactly where they were going to go so they could all talk to each other. And I said, well, who's going to go and rescue anybody? Their whole operations plan was going to a place where they could all communicate with each other with their ham radios. So.
Oh, man.
Officials say the liquid nitrogen leak killed 6 people and sent 11.
I'll do a little check-in.
Hey, Lake.
Hey. Thanks for putting this on. I found this just through a Google search. Oops. I was just poking around at ham radio stuff today and looking at I found your group. And then I found the calendar, and it showed that there was a meeting today. So I'm happy that it all worked out. And I'm down in Multnomah Village area in Portland, and I have a little radio. I picked it up probably 6 months ago, the Baofeng as well. Mm-hmm. So actually my brother encouraged me to get started. So I actually don't have a call sign or a license or anything. So I'm just really getting the basics. But yeah, I figured out the Chirp software and downloaded a bunch of the repeaters that are around, and I mainly am listening into that W7RAT.
Yep.
And so that's been a lot of fun. I turned off the transmission on my radio because I was scared I'd be doing things I didn't want to be doing. So that's made me a lot more comfortable just playing around with it, and then listening in, and kind of spying on people's conversations and stuff, and taking down call names and call signs. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, for those of you who don't have a call sign yet, and you're thinking, should I wait to buy a radio? The radios now are so inexpensive that just buying, you know, a $25, $35 Baofeng radio, there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't transmit until you get your license. But that's a great thing to do. And Lake, are you thinking of getting your license? Are you studying?
Yeah, my sister got hers and my brother got his, so I've got to get mine. So
yeah,
they're one of them is in Austin, Texas, and my sister is in Sacramento, California. So
awesome.
Yeah,
definitely get your license, and then you can actually, you know, use the Baofeng radio and then upgrade your radio and have a lot of fun. Cool. So it's a fun hobby.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so this week's topic is going to be radio etiquette, and I did focus this more on FM voice, or voice in particular, just because it's really the first thing that people get into when they get into ham radio. There's really no additional training. Like, you don't have to learn Morse code. You don't have to set up your computer for digital. And if you do those anyway, especially if you go into CW, which is a continuous wave, it also means Morse code, then you'll probably learn a lot of the etiquette as you're learning the Morse code letters, simply because you're already doing a lot of studying. Dan, our resident Morse code guru, is here tonight also, and he's holding classes for learning Morse code and practicing getting on the air too. Dan, did you want to just tell them a little bit about your class that you have going on now?
Well, yeah, it's a beginner's Morse code class. We're about 2/3 of the way through the alphabet. And excuse me, got a froggy voice. And if we get enough interest, I'll probably start a beginning class in the springtime. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now.
And Dan's really good. He, you know, you can go from not knowing any character. Most people know SOS just because that's a common thing. But yeah, he'll get you learning no characters to going 20 words a minute relatively quickly. And you know, some of you may be wondering, well, why Morse code? Isn't that like totally 1890s? Morse code is probably one of the best ways to get your signal out, just because it requires so little power, so little bandwidth, that you can carry radios that are no bigger than a pack of cigarettes up a mountainside and talk to people literally around the world on very little power. So thank you, Dan.
Sure. Yeah. I can talk more about it later, but you know.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
All right. So radio etiquette, I think one of the most important things that no matter what mode, whether it's voice, digital, or CW, if you listen first, it does two things. When you're talking on the radio, it's not like a telephone or the computer where you have many different channels. It's really just usually one frequency. So you don't want to make sure that you're not stepping on somebody else and talking over somebody else. On FM, when two people are talking on the same frequency at the same time, most of the time nobody can hear or understand anything. So listening first is very important. The other reason that listening first is important is because you learn a lot of the etiquette about the geographic area or the mode or the band that you're using. So I put up here that there is different etiquette for using voice or digital or CW, and there's different etiquette for using simplex versus using duplex. There's different etiquette for the different radio bands, HF versus VHF versus microwave, and even geographic areas. People in Texas, people on the East Coast, their etiquette for radio communication is slightly different than it is here over on the West Coast. So listening first will help you understand all of these things. For those of you who don't know, simplex is essentially just using the same frequency back and forth between two people. The most familiar thing I can think of is, as a kid, if you had a walkie-talkie and you were talking with your friend down the street, that is simplex, where you push to talk and you release to listen. Duplex is a little bit different, and that is mainly in ham radio using a repeater, which is another radio either on top of a building or a mountain somewhere, where you're actually using two frequencies, one to talk and one to listen. And repeaters really just extend your range. The one place I would recommend you at least read some of the more important points is the FCC Part 97, and that is the FCC rulebook for ham radio. You guys that are either studying for the test or have taken the test recently probably remember a lot of the questions were directly from the Part 97. So there's a couple of sections in particular I'll kind of point out in the following slides that you could take a look at. So here's a couple of points for FM repeater use, and that's again where you're talking through a repeater, which is essentially two radios that are hooked up backwards, usually on a mountain or some other high place, that if you are using a handheld, you can extend your range. It tends to 50, 100 miles, 150 miles by just using your handheld. An example would be like if I were here tonight, I'm in Oregon City, I could actually go outside and talk through a repeater and talk to people in Salem just using a 5-watt handheld and a little rubber duck outside my front door. So for repeater etiquette, again, listening to repeaters is a great way to learn kind of like the etiquette that is happening. There are some repeater networks. There's a popular one in California called the WIN network. I believe it's spelled W-I-N-N, actually, maybe just W-I-N. And it's a series or group of repeaters that are all linked up. So there's quite a few repeaters on the WIN network in California, but then they also have a lot of other repeaters that are linked all to the same network in Japan and Australia, on the East Coast, even I think there's one here in Oregon. And they have a different etiquette for how to use the repeater. When you are using a radio, and this is especially true with FRS radios, but it can be true with ham radios, you want to key the mic and then start speaking. If you do it both at the same time, where you're pushing the button right when you're saying your first word, sometimes the first part of the word or your first word may get cut off. So your radio essentially just needs some time to warm up a little bit. And again, you want to finish speaking and then unkey the mic. That'll make sure that your message is complete, that they got all of your words. A lot of repeater, especially repeater networks, the WIN system in particular, they really frown upon people using either jargon or Q codes on the repeater. Q codes are a Morse code kind of very specific shorthand. So for example, QTH means your place where you are now or your home. There's other jargon, for example, XYL, which is probably an older jargon, means ex young lady. Usually it's somebody that is married to the ham radio operator, even if they are a ham radio operator themselves. OM for old man. So when you're speaking on FM repeaters, because the voice is so clear, you don't usually need to use Q codes or jargon. It doesn't bother me, but I do know that there are some people that are basically parked on repeaters that, it seems like they live their life on the repeater. They get very upset if you say that your QTH is in Portland. I don't get it myself, but just so you know, if somebody else comes on and says, you really shouldn't be using that on here, that's why. You'll want to give your call sign clearly and slowly. Your call sign is your name. So when you identify yourself, a lot of people know you by your name. For example, Dan, N7CQR. Merino. Sometimes you can just call them by their last three letters, EMV. But you want to do that so that the other person knows who they're talking to. And if you're calling somebody on a repeater, even if you know that person, usually you want to give that person's call sign a couple of times, just to give them a chance to like hear their call sign. You'll soon find out that when somebody, just like when somebody calls your own first name, your ears perk up. After a while, when you hear your call sign, it's sort of the same way, but sometimes maybe they're not listening to the radio as closely as you think they are. So just give it a couple of times. When you want to initiate a conversation on a repeater, but you don't necessarily know if anybody's on, or you just want to spark up a conversation, normally on the HF or high frequency bands, you would just say, CQ, CQ, this is K2MAX. On repeaters, for whatever reason, it's kind of you don't want to call CQ. You want to just give your call sign, and then you would say monitoring or listening. For example, this is K2MAX monitoring, which is kind of the polite etiquette way of saying, hey, this is Max, K2MAX. I'm here and I'm willing to talk to anybody. And then if you hear a couple of people talking on the repeater and you want to join the conversation, the easiest way to do that is to just put your call sign in between a natural break in the conversation. And people will hear that, and they should, if they're polite, invite you to join their conversation. And remember to ID, but don't overdo it. So the rule is that you have to ID at the end of your conversation and every 10 minutes. So if you're speaking for 15 minutes, you would ID once at 10 minutes and once at 15 minutes, which is the end of your conversation. You don't need to ID every time you key up the mic. Sometimes that can get a little annoying to some people. And Marino, have you been reading the chat?
Yes, there are no questions at this
point.
Point.
Cool, thank you. Sorry, it's hard to talk and read the chat at the same time. All right, a few more FM repeater etiquette things.
One thing that would be great would be to have these slides after. Will they be posted on the homepage?
Yes. Cool. Yeah, they'll be posted on the Portland Amateur Radio Club. So we'll post the video and the slide deck and the chat. So you feel free to save the chat if you like, and you can do that in the chat where you type in what you want. If you click on the three ellipses there, you can actually download the chat. But if you forget, I'll post it up there also.
Max,
so yeah.
On the repeater etiquette, say if I wanted to try to talk to you through a repeater, I would give your call sign first, and then mine. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it's essentially in the form of to and then from, much like a letter is. So I would say, if I were calling Dan, I would say N7CQR K2MAX. That's probably the shortest and easiest way. I might say give his call sign a couple of times. And then Dan would answer K2MAX, this is N7CQR.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah. So when you are communicating or when you're trying to make sure that your radio is hitting the repeater, so to speak, a lot of people are in the habit of just keying up the repeater, pushing the push to talk. And when you let go, there's a little bit of a repeater tail, and then it'll drop. And you'll hear that. If you listen to repeaters, probably Lake has already heard this, but when you key it up and then you let go and you don't say anything, you can hear that repeater tail then drop. And it's a great way to kind of find out if you're making it into the repeater. But remember that with all your transmissions, you should ID. So if you do it once or twice, it probably is, it's not annoying, it's not okay. But if you continuously, kerchunk the repeater, sometimes the repeater owners or the repeater monitors will actually take the repeater down, and it is kind of annoying for other people. So if you want to do something like that, just make sure you give your call sign. K2MAX testing is perfectly okay.
Max Barry is asking, what is kerchunk? Why you call it that way?
Yeah, so essentially that's what it sounds like. So when you push the push to talk, you're sending your signal out to the repeater, and the repeater then starts retransmitting that basically dead airspace is what it is. And when you let go of your push to talk, the repeater continues to transmit for anywhere from half a second to 4 seconds. And then you'll hear that repeater stop transmitting. And that it sounds sort of like a kerchunk, because you'll hear a transmission and then it'll go kerch. Is the best way I can kind of describe it. And so some people think, well, that's, I want to check to make sure my signal is getting into the repeater. So I'm just going to key up, not say anything, let go. And then I hear that repeater tail, and then I hear the repeater tail drop. So if you do that, just give your call sign. It's just proper radio etiquette. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's totally acceptable get on the repeater and ask for a signal report. In fact, that's a really good idea if you're not sure if you can access a repeater. But just come on and say, this is N7CQR looking for a signal report. And almost invariably, somebody will come back to you and say, what they're going to say, more than likely, is you're full quieting. And that's kind of a slang term, which relates to the FM mode. That just means that you are fully intelligible. If they say you're scratchy, then that's when you start thinking, perhaps it's my location, perhaps it's the antenna, perhaps it's the power. And those are usually the typical issues. But I would strongly suggest folks, if they want to test a repeater, to just get on and ask for a signal report.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with asking for a signal report or just giving your ID. I think what's really just frowned upon is just keying up and not identifying. When you are talking to other people on the repeater, you'll notice that there's this repeater tail. And as I remember, the park repeaters generally are around a second and a half, where the repeater will continue to transmit. And so you'll actually hear that when you unkey your radio, because when you key your radio, it's transmitting on frequency A. When you unkey your radio, it listens to frequency B. And so frequency B is where the repeater is transmitting, and you'll hear kind of like a dead transmission, or a silent transmission, and then it'll drop. And so that's called the repeater tail. And you want to let that repeater tail drop. You don't have to do it necessarily every time, especially if the transmissions back and forth are short, but you'll want to let it drop every 2, 3 transmissions back and forth, definitely. That does a couple of things. First off, it leaves space for other people to join. Repeaters are out there for people to communicate with casually, but they're also kind of out there to, if there is an emergency or something, that people can kind of interrupt whatever conversation there is going on and be able to kind of get the help that they need, whether that's directions to McDonald's or they have somebody with a broken leg. So let the repeater drop for a second or two to leave space to join for others. And then there's a second reason that you want to let the repeater drop. And that is, if you don't, and you and your buddy keep going back and forth, and you don't let it drop, the repeaters, almost all repeaters have a timer. Some are shorter than others. Some are only 60 seconds, some are a minute and a half. Some, I think the longest probably is going to be 3 minutes. And the timer is going when it's transmitting. And if you don't let that repeater drop, then you do what's called time out the repeater. And it's quite embarrassing. We all do it, I think, at one time or another. But what ends up happening is the repeater stops working for half a minute, And so everybody in the group is waiting for the repeater to come back up. And then, that's essentially timing out the repeater. The reason that they have timers is because if somebody, either a jammer or somebody unintentionally, is sitting on their microphone, the repeater is not just transmitting for hours on end until somebody goes up there and turns it off or something like that. Any questions on that?
I have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another reason for timing is as a protection for the circuitry of the repeater, because repeater is sending out RF radio frequency at a certain amount of power, and if we were to, and is a specified design for a certain duty cycle, which is a certain ratio between time it transmits and time that is quiet, that is not doing anything. And so if it is always on, that is a problem for the circuitry, and therefore the reason also for the timeout.
Yep, exactly.
I have one more comment on that.
Yeah,
also,
go ahead, Fred.
It's also good to leave some time if someone wants to make a comment on your discussion or give you an information or something like that, to give some space between your transmission and my transmission, so like that they can jump in and say something.
Yeah, that's absolutely, yes, exactly. And the best way to jump in, if you remember from my last slide, is just to put your call sign out there. You don't have to put your name or anything else. One of the things that, I don't know if I have this in another slide, is some people will say break. It's kind of frowned upon to say break. It's more of like an emergency situation. And if you did actually have an emergency, a better thing to say would be emergency instead of break or your call sign. But yeah, definitely leave a second or two or more between your transmissions. That's also a way just to make it look like you're not hogging the repeater. Sometimes what'll happen is repeaters will have scheduled nets or other activities that are happening. For example, on Monday nights on 146.84, which is one of the Portland Amateur Radio Club repeaters, they have every Monday night at 7 o'clock, they have a net where everybody kind of meets on that frequency at that time, and they'll check in. So if you're talking at 658, 659, usually the net control operator, whoever's controlling the net or running the net, will jump in and say, hey, we're having a net here in 3 minutes, just to let you know. So the best option for you guys, if you're just casually chatting, would be just to go to another repeater or just kind of wait until they're done. That particular net doesn't last much longer than about 15 minutes. And then you can go back to talking with the person that you were talking to. But it's polite to yield to any scheduled nets or other activities that may be happening on a repeater. One thing that I put in here is to please do use the open repeaters. We are very fortunate up here in Oregon, Washington, Northern California. Most of the repeaters are open, which means that pretty much anybody with a ham radio license can go ahead and use them to make contacts with people that they know or people they don't know. So using them helps keep them on the air. Otherwise, if nobody ever talked on a repeater, the repeater owners would look at it and say, well, this isn't worth it. Let's just not spend the money on the tower rental and the electricity and the internet. So please do use them. And then if you do use them often, consider supporting the whatever group or person that's actually putting them up on the air. So the ARRG, and I thought I knew what that stood for, but they are a local repeater group, and they have quite a few repeaters here in the Pacific Northwest. And it does take a lot of money to keep them on the air. I think that their dues, I think, or just a way to support them, is about $12 a year. I think for $20 a year, you get some extra benefits. So it does literally take thousands and thousands of dollars to keep them on the air. So if you do use them, consider supporting them. The Portland Amateur Radio Club has quite a few repeaters on the air, and the best way to support them is just to get a membership into the Portland Amateur Radio Club. $18 a year. I think it's $24 for a family. it's a great way to just support the repeaters. All right, we're going to switch to FM simplex etiquette. And when you do, I don't know why I said use the standard simplex, but the standard simplex frequencies, oh, I get it. So the 2 meters is from 144 to 148 megahertz, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a handheld, an FM handheld, that you can use any frequency in there, because a lot of them are reserved for certain things. There are frequencies that are used for repeater inputs, and there's frequencies that are used for repeater outputs. So you don't want to use those particular frequencies if you're just talking to somebody else using your radio and their radio and nothing else. You want to pick the standard simplex frequencies. So for 2 meters, that's 146.42 to 146.6 and 147.4 to 147.58. And you don't necessarily have to memorize this. It is available on certain websites. And one of our upcoming topics is going to be band plans. So not only the national band plan, but the local band plan. But just know that these are the frequencies that you would want to use for simplex frequencies. And you don't want to necessarily even just use any frequency within that range, because in the Pacific Northwest, we have standardized on 20 kilohertz steps. So for example, 146.42 is a simplex frequency. So is 146.62, 82, 147.02. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah. So the steps between are 20 kilohertz. So essentially you're incrementing that digit to the right of the decimal by 2. In California, because it's more crowded and there are fewer simplex frequencies, their steps are 15 kilohertz. So it's just a slightly different set of standard simplex frequencies. There are certain calling frequencies, and I apologize, I should have put them up here. On 2 meters, the standard calling frequency, or the calling frequency, is 146.52. And that's a great frequency just to monitor in general. We've had a few discussions in the past, like how can I program my radio to for all the repeaters between here and San Francisco? And although it's great to monitor repeaters, sometimes they are not used as much as even just the 2 meter calling frequency 146.52. You may actually get and hear more activity on there than you would using repeaters. That being said, calling frequencies are just that. They're frequencies to make contacts on, but you shouldn't necessarily have 20-minute, 30-minute, hour-long conversations on those particular frequencies. Once you make contact with somebody, it's polite to move to another simplex frequency rather than using that one, just because other people may want to make contact with other people, and then they would move to other simplex frequencies. Any questions on that? Marino, am I missing anything in chat?
Max, I did have a question, please.
Yeah.
If you're these 146.42 to 146.60, say if you're trying to come up with somebody, send your CERT or net, and to talk with them individually, and then are those busy? Which one would you normally transfer up to or out? I mean, is it traditional? You stay within that still 146 point, whatever those 18 point, whatever, you just stay within that range. Is that correct?
That's a great question. So here in the Pacific Northwest, the simplex frequencies aren't used that much. So it's not like you're going to find so much activity, except on the calling frequency. You're not going to find so much activity that you're going to be scrambling around to find a clear frequency. 146.52 is the calling frequency, but I would say the other popular frequencies are 146.54 and 146.56, 146.58. So those 3 frequencies, I guess, plus the calling frequency are the most popular. And I do need to make a correction. It is not the first digit to the right. It's the second digit to the right. So it'd be 146.42, 146.46, 146.48, 146.50.
Hey,
so
Max.
I got my kilohertz mixed up. Yep.
Anna is
Marino.
asking in the chat room, what does steps mean again?
Yeah, so steps are essentially, if you look at the 146.42 is the lowest end of the simplex frequencies. And so you could talk on 146.42, that would be one simplex frequency, but you don't want to talk on 146.43 because that would be an incorrect step. So 146.44 would be a good one because if you add 20 kilohertz to 146.42, that would be 146.44. Does that make sense? But like I said, 146.52 is the standard calling frequency for 2 meters, but the other popular ones are .54, 5.6, and 5.8.
Max,
go ahead.
I was just going to throw something else in there, particularly for those of you who are net members. You probably, and especially if you're studying for ARO, you'll probably see some templates of repeater frequencies and simplex frequencies. And certain simplex frequencies in the event of an emergency would take priority just as the same as any repeater frequency. Also be aware that from time to time, the net programs will do exercises on particular simplex frequencies. So the usual rule applies, which is you listen first and, before you grab a simplex frequency and transmit. And if you're not clear on those, I would consult with your, with your team ARO for your net team, and they should be able to help you clarify. And in fact, I'm the ARO for the Selwood Moreland team. We have our own simplex frequency on 2 meters and 440. So that doesn't mean that anybody else can use it because we use it very seldom, but it's just one of those things to be aware of when you're thinking, particularly for net operators.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dan. And so for those of you who are in net, you may want to just take a look at the website, because I think that Marino showed us last week, there is a list of frequencies, both repeater and simplex frequencies, that you would want to have as a net member. And those list a lot of the common simplex frequencies, and they're also assigned to certain neighborhoods. Again, they're, like Dan said, they're really only used seldomly, but it's also just a good reference if you wanted to pick a common standard 2 meter or 440 simplex frequency. Download the
I'm talking directly with the folks that are actually
download that, because that's a great reference for you guys. All right, so I think I just have a couple more slides. This is general ham radio etiquette in general, no matter what band or what kind of mode you are using. Part 97.113 is fairly short. It's only probably 10 paragraphs, but it gives you kind of prohibited transmissions. These are things that the FCC says that you can and cannot do. So I would definitely read that. I definitely try to avoid profanity, politics, religion, and toxic opinions. And toxic opinions, I'll just give you an example. There's a lot of people on one side that say that getting rid of Morse code testing for ham radio is the worst thing that has ever happened, ever. And then there's a lot of people on the other side that say that it's the best thing that ever happened ever. And there are people who will commonly get on the radio and argue about that back and forth. It's just one of the topics that you may want to avoid. Any topic that leads to raising your voice or profanity, you probably don't want to do that on the radio. And keep your, this is kind of important for a couple of reasons, but keeping your messages, both formal and informal, short, just because the radio is a shared resource. You don't want to necessarily, say something in 100 sentences that you could easily have said in 20 or 10 or 5. And also, it's good practice because as a net participant or somebody that's interested communications, the one thing that they will stress is keep your messages short. Keep it under 25 words usually. All messages you should keep under 25 words because there's going to be a lot of message passing back and forth in emergency communications, and it's just good practice to do that. There are going to be people, and you will, especially on HF radio, but on VHF too, you will hear people, some are licensed, some are not, that will try to jam frequencies, that will try to somehow interfere with other people's enjoyment or use of a particular frequency. So they are kind of known as lids, is an old word that goes back into the 1920s or before. And these are people that are generally just bad operators. So the best option is just to spin the dial because you will never win against jammers or bad operators. So yeah, I mean, there's other options, but I've never heard or seen anybody outshout or outpower anybody that is acting not good on a radio. Another suggestion is to use standard phonetics. That would be the standard, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. This is something that's on the technician test. So hopefully everybody at least is familiar with that. Try to avoid cute phonetics. I gave an example down here, N1OMI. Sometimes people say this is Norway 1 Old Man Ian. Anybody see a problem with that? The I on the end is could be mistaken for an E. So a lot of people do it. It's cute, but especially in contests, it can get a little bit annoying sometimes. And try to avoid.
It defies the purpose of having a standard.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Try to avoid transmitting personal information, either your personal information or others. Just realize that there can be literally hundreds of people listening to what you are saying on the air, especially if you are talking over a repeater that's networked with tens or hundreds of other repeaters on the air.
So in other words, be on your best behavior and leave the worst of yourself for the internet. Just go there, but don't touch.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
I was trying to think, do we still have any active auto patch repeaters?
I believe the ARRG group does. And I think that if you do join their group with it's been years since I've looked up their information, but I think it's $20 a year and they will give you auto patch codes.
We might explain what that is because that's kind of old school.
Yeah, so auto patches are essentially you have the ability with your 2-meter 440 ham radio to talk through a repeater, and then you would put in a code which would activate the auto patch, which is a link to telephone. So you can make calls to people using your handheld radio. And when I was a kid, that was actually pretty darn cool because none of my friends had cell phones, and yet I was able to make calls to people, my parents or 911, in my car before anybody had cell phones. And I actually do remember calling 911 several times for either disabled vehicles that were actually in the lane of travel on the freeway, drunk drivers I've called before. And it's pretty cool. Now it's a lot less cool now because it's just so much easier to use your cell phone. Everybody and their grandmother has one now. but it's still out there and people still do use them.
You know, particularly if you're out of cell range, you might be able to reach a repeater. So if for instance, you think that you're going to be traveling or out in some regions where you wouldn't get cell coverage, but you might need to do some sort of a phone call for emergency purposes, it would be good to acquaint yourself with that. And again, you know, giving the dues to the Amateur Radio Relay Group, which is ARRG, and upon request, they'll give you the codes. And
hey, Dan.
you know, you use your touch tones.
Yeah, Dan, two things. The Western Oregon Radio Club Work has also an auto patch that you can access once you pay your dues. They give you this privilege. And
great.
Second thing, you got your mic of your headphones that is hitting your sweater, probably the zipper, and is causing a little bit of tingling. Okay, cool.
Maybe that's better. Yeah. Okay. Where's WORC? Which repeaters do they cover?
It's the one where there is the National Traffic System net every night at 6:05. So there is one in Clackamas, 146-800. There is another one around Sandy, and so on.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah.
And by the way, Etienne tonight is doing my usual job of slinging links. He's doing great. Keep going, Etienne.
Thanks, Etienne. One of the things I guess my last point on radio etiquette is that many years ago, probably 20 or more years ago, conducting any type of business, or no matter how remotely related, was prohibited on ham radio. However, FCC did relax those rules. I believe in either the late 80s or early 90s, where you actually can conduct some limited business on the radio. For example, using an auto patch to order a pizza used to be illegal, but it became legal, not necessarily good etiquette, but legal because you weren't putting money directly into your pocket by conducting that business. So you still cannot, for example, coordinate all of your Uber drivers using ham radio, but you can do things like coordinate a catering, order for your net group that you are part of. So just giving you some background. So there's still there's still a lot of business that you can't do on ham radio if you're actually earning money from it, but it's been a lot relaxed from the 1980s. Normally we have a little bit more time for questions and answers, but at this time, this is kind of the end of the presentation. So anybody have any questions, comments on radio etiquette or any other thing ham radio related? And I'm going to put up future meeting topics here. So next week is going to be ham radio nets. We'll talk about ham fests, expos, and swap meets. And you would think that those wouldn't be happening anymore right now, but they actually are. They've just gone virtual.
I do have a question, Max.
Hey, Jay.
Hi. I tried to connect into a repeater one time, and somebody told me that to turn off wires or my wires. So I ended up Googling that to try to figure out what was wrong, but maybe that should be mentioned as an etiquette issue also.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So for those of you who have Yaesu radios, the most popular one being the FT60R, if you push and hold the 0 key, it will turn on a feature on the radio called wires that allows you to allows your radio to kind of know whether or not other people are in range or out of range. I'm sure it's a wonderful feature. It's just not used very often. And what ends up happening is if you do have it turned on, when you push your push to talk, it will emit a tone which will block out the first word or two that you say. And so most of the time it gets turned on by accident. And the easiest way to turn it off is to push and hold the 0 button on at least the FT60R, and that will turn it off. There is a way also to permanently turn it off so you don't accidentally turn it on. And I apologize, I should have had that, but I can put that up on the website. Thanks, Jay, for that. Anybody else? Questions, comments? Ham radio in general? Any topic that you would like to see coming up?
I have one question, 2 questions.
Hey, go ahead.
And I put my screen name on there instead of my given name, so you guys can find me on the internet if that happens in the future.
Awesome, thanks, Anna.
So I'm going to take my test soon, and I'm going to try for general, but I'm pretty sure I'm testing at like 90%-ish for the technician. So I know in the chat someone had linked in like a private message, but also do you, like, who's testing first, like tomorrow, or, you know, because and then would you talk on for just a brief moment, they're going to charge fees, or do they already charge fees and it's increasing, or what does that scenario look like? And I'll listen with the mute button. Thank you. Cool.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody will put in the chat. The local testing group is run by Herb Wiener, and he, I believe, has availability almost like even next day. And if not, then 2 days out, you can sign up for one of his testing sessions. All tests, because of COVID, are done online. So there are a lot of testing opportunities for everybody. It used to be that if you wanted to take a test next week, sometimes you'd have to drive down to Eugene or Grants Pass or wait a month when they had a test up here in Portland. The website to go to is AA7HW. And I think somebody will probably put it in the chat. And I want to say .com, but I want to make sure I'm right first.
Max, I did put it in the chat room.
Cool, awesome.
This is the WFIYIVC.org. That's the organization that Herb or does the online testing with.
Yeah, could you put in his, look up his other website? I think it's aahw.com or org. And you can actually schedule your test directly from there.
I don't know about that website.
As far as the fees, yes, it's I believe it's $14, and that covers the test fee, and the part of that money goes to the FCC, and part of it stays with the group so they can build better software. And he's actually doing some things like buying tablets so that when we actually do go back to in-person testing, it'll all be done on tablets instead of filling in the circle. So does that answer your question?
Follow-up question, actually, because you said tablets, and that was where my hesitation was. And I went online initially to try to answer the question, because the ARRL website said at one point, you can't use a Chromebook. You had to use a laptop with a built-in webcam. But then someone clarified I could use a Chromebook if I had my smartphone adjacent. And so maybe if you could clarify that, the rigmarole. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why you can't just use a Chromebook is because the Chromebook does not allow you to look at a web page and then also have your camera and your audio working at the same time. So it's just a limitation of the Chromebook. But Herb is saying that you can use a Chromebook, but you would just need some other smart device that would then, he would be able to see you and you would be able to see him, and also then the audio would go both ways. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that clarifies it a little bit. Thank you. And yeah, because the Chromebook's like one of the, I have 2 teenagers that got them from school, so I don't know a thing about them. Thank you guys.
Yeah, so Herb is really great. Marino put up that aa7hw.org. And if you go there, one of the links on the left-hand side will then take you to the scheduling page. And then you'll see that you can just sign up for one of the testing sessions. And I think they usually happen like at 2 and at 6 in the afternoon.